Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for investing your time with us today. The International Association of Female Artists, IAFA, is the world's leading organization for women artists. Its membership includes video artists, filmmakers, photographers, actresses, performance artists, folk artists, musicians, and creative writers. The mission of the International Association of Female Artists is to establish a platform and create a community for helping women artists worldwide. Art has a social role to serve, and the artist has a moral obligation to society. It can engage the social issues and the environmental of its day, either directly or indirectly. Not every artwork needs to address the poverty, famine, war, corruption, and injustice, but an artist should not ignore the pain and the suffering of his fellow human beings. Because of that, IAFA is hosting a series of panel discussions, collectively titled Artists Without Borders. Beginning in May 2020, each panel will be held with a specific theme related to the current social issues and limited to 9 artists. Today's panel discussion theme is social justice and racism, and will be hosted by artist Ellen Schlitz, Vice President of the International Association of Female Artists.
Social justice is an ideal condition in which all members of a society have the same basic rights, protections, opportunities, obligations, and social benefits. Racism, in essence, is the lack of fair treatment of racial groups designated as other in the society. As I have discovered, justice has many meanings and definitions to many people, but it is synonymous with right action, or a principle of an ideal sense of what is just. And we can only say that today is an attempt to begin this conversation of many going forward. Many of the artists here are committed to providing a voice to social justice through their mediums and creative process. Many of the artists represented here today go beyond their art to provide community support in multiple ways, giving of their time and resources to make a difference in the world. With the horrific events that have occurred these past 2 weeks, International Association of Female Artists felt the need to do more to offer a voice to the echoing cries of injustice that have been repeated over and over again for many years, in particular for the African American. By creating Artists Without Borders, we're creating a forum for our voices and for a format to hear from those both locally and globally. Today, I am asking each panelist to think about ways in which they have experienced or observed social injustice and racism close up. Each panelist will have 3 to 4 minutes to speak, and then we will open it up to people for questions or comments.
Here in Minneapolis, we have one of the largest instances of social injustice, especially with police violence. So I wasn't aware of all of the past. Although living here, I would read it in the newspaper, but it seemed like it took this incident to really bring out the feelings I had over the years for what had been done. And I'm eager to, in some way, try to work through our IAFA, which I'm the president of, so that we can make a meaningful contribution. And it's just, after watching the memorial yesterday, we all have to join together to bring about a definite change to get that knee off our neck for the African Americans this time.
So the murder of George Floyd is a tragedy, one that can be seen from many points of view. To me, the death of George Floyd is an example of current condition around the world. tragedy is happening constantly, not only in the US, but also in many other countries. What has happened is painful and tragic, but how is it that all we know, we all know about it? How has awareness of this one even been so quickly and universally spread? I think the impact of the media, what it selectively amplifies and what it ignores. So I think of all the violence and discrimination against minorities happening on a daily basis worldwide and even locally. And I wonder what percentage never comes to our attention even. So what I hope is that the power of this movement can continue to enact change and improve a circumstance for minorities everywhere.
Talking about social justice is very challenging for me. I haven't had the courage to actually take much action, but my art is beginning to voice and be my means of expressing. And Lando Castillo was murdered by police only a mile from my home here, and that was just 2016, I believe. It wasn't very long ago. And so the visceral feelings of the threat is I'm a white woman, but I feel the threat, and I know I don't feel anywhere near the fear or threat that Black people feel. However, my father was abusive, and so I learned coping skills to try to survive. And I think part of it is the body trauma they talk about in your family history, that you can be triggered or relive things. And so the idea of one of the artists here is involved in training nonviolence and de-escalation. That just sounds fabulous, both for me personally, but as well as the way I might operate within the world.
I studied international management and communication studies at Gustavus Adolphus College, which is in Minnesota. So I lived in the States from 2006 to 2011 because I worked for a year after I graduated. So in terms of racism, I must confess that I wasn't really aware that I was Black until I moved to the States. So prior to moving to the States in 2006, I had visited a number of times with my family. But you know, when you visit a country and you live in a country, they're two different things. So my first year of uni, I remember that my cousin and I went to go and visit some other cousins in Houston, and we went to a Walmart over there. And while we were there, we just noticed, so my cousin had come from England to visit me, and we both went to Houston to go and see these other cousins. And I just noticed that while we were there was a sales associate that just kept following us everywhere. And it was strange for both of us because we couldn't understand why there was someone tailing us around the store. So when we told our cousins who were based in Houston, they were the ones who explained to us what was going on. And I mean, we come from good families, good values. It was just a strange concept. It was just very strange to us. So, I mean, I must say that obviously I experienced different forms of racism while I was in the States, but I also think because I come from the most populous Black country in the world, it was just very difficult for me to also sometimes associate it, have a feeling of inferiority complex because I don't feel that at home. And right. I was very grateful for that upbringing because I had an African-American friend come and visit me in Nigeria in 2009. And from the airport to the house, she just kept looking around. And I was just like, what's going on with you? And she said she has never seen so many Black people in one place. And for me, I mean, I was just like, they're just Nigerians. I mean, what's the big deal? But by the time I thought about it and I was able to see it through her eyes, it was like, okay, for the first time, I guess she doesn't feel like a minority. I've never thought about it. So I guess there were lots of things that happened that sometimes other people would attribute to race. And it would take me a while to attribute it to race myself because it just didn't click for a while. But I also must confess, I mean, my younger brother is in America right now. He went to the same college that I did. And I told him, even though America is probably the same as it was when I was there, I also think I feel like it's more vocal and more hateful from at least what we see on the news. So sometimes I feel like our experience is also very different. So the experience that my younger brother Rotimi has, I think, is different from the experience that I had from 2006 to 11. So even though I'm not saying these things did not happen, of course they were going on. It's just that I also feel like we had a completely different experience. So yeah, that's that's my own take. And I was also going to add, I mean, in terms of social justice, I mean, one of the things that we're battling with right now in Nigeria that's becoming a huge topic. So obviously we've been talking about racism in the States, but another thing that we're also talking about a lot of right now is also rape, because a lot of rape cases are coming out, and you know, and a lot of times people walk away, they don't get convicted, you know. So a lot of people are getting triggered, like Lynette said, by that right now, because it's like, okay, people are not protected. I mean, a lady came out with a story the other day that somebody came into her hotel room and raped her. So a lot of people are getting triggered by that right now. So that's also a major topic for us in Nigeria at the moment.
I live in Minneapolis, and I'm a visual artist.
Would you like to say anything about any personal experience that you might have had observed, where you observed social justice, social injustice, or racism?
Yeah, I was at the bank just a couple of weeks ago, and you couldn't go inside the bank. You did the drive-up window, even if you were walking. And there was a person who I think was a Hispanic male, and he was at one window, and I walked up to a different window, but he had been waiting longer, and the banker invited me to go before the other man, but he wasn't Black. He was maybe a Mexican or Hispanic somehow.
Subtle things like that occur all the time, and we sometimes aren't even aware of it, but it's we are becoming more mindful, I think.
I am from St. Paul, Minnesota, and there was a bombing this last week about a block away from my house. It brought home the need for, or not maybe the need, but the occurrence of civil unrest, revolutions, of course, in the process. And I pray that we are lucky and this is the start of a revolution that has very little blood spilled. That is my hope. But I also, I'm a parent of a couple of children, or 4 children total, 2 of which are African American. And the way they experience the world is totally different than how I experience the world. We've had discussions because I have been sure in my Caucasian upbringing that I know what it feels like to be discriminated against. I mean, it's not that I haven't been discriminated against in many, many forms, in many places, in many conditions, but the way they get discriminated against feels specifically like race. So I have been working on overcoming my white conditioning. I am really well aware that as a person who was raised Caucasian, and no matter who you see on the screen, I look very Caucasian to me, but I don't look that way to most people. I have a universal face that people glom onto, and they're never really sure what I am, but they are usually sure that I'm of a group they love or they hate. So I get to experience racial discrimination on many forms, and yet there have been times when I have traveled where people thought I was so pretty because I looked just like them, they had to come touch me in the droves, you know, to make sure I was real. So the world is interestingly divided by skin color and facial components, not to mention hair. I will say that it feels very true to one of my daughters when she says, "You have no idea what it's like to be the only Black person in the room." And I, of course, will say, of course I know what it's like to be the only woman in the room. I was out there in the trenches fighting for women's rights. I know what it's like to be the only woman in a boardroom full of men. But it doesn't feel the same. So I need to pay attention to that, because in this 12-step group I'm doing on light conditioning, it becomes obvious to me that we can really negate the positions of people who have suffered with good intent, with good liberal thoughts. What we do is, there's this lovely slogan, Black Lives Matter, an organization that's put a lot of work into saying we are valuable people. And yet it's too easy for us to negate it as Caucasian or majority people by saying all lives matter. Of course, all lives matter, you know, but Black lives matter very much too. And part of the problem is, of course, a society that believes there's not enough to anything. So there's not enough opportunity if I don't take from somebody else. There is not enough peace if I don't get my share first. That because of that mentality, racism flourishes and discrimination flourishes even more. But as I learn slowly to put aside my sense of I know what's right, and I have it in spades, I know everything, I've just experienced everything. As I can try to put that aside, there was a really lovely line. There's been two really lovely lines, one of which is really a cliche, but it is justice delayed is justice refused. And it's true. The justice of equality under the law, equality in the job place, equality anywhere, that's justice delayed. As long as we don't do it, we are the problem. And the other thing I have learned over the years, especially recently, is that intent may matter to us personally, but what we are called to is action. So our means of being, our actions speak far louder than intent. Nobody can see our intent. Everybody can see what we do and who we are. So with that, I'll let someone else have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Joanne. And last but not least, Loy, I'm sorry, I just thought you had spoken already, and you did, but not here. And
I say the problem is not how high the Black crime rate is, nor whether the police should enforce the law on the Black suspects, but having kill a person in a clearly inhuman way under the eyes of the public, in the ear of we media, which stimulated people's deep sympathy for human nature. So actually, it is not the racial discrimination question, but should be the deeper level humanitarian question. My opinion. Yeah, I think
that has really touched me, Loy, what you said, because that is huge.
yes.
And I guess what I'd like to take that statement, because you brought that piece into it, talk about, I heard someone a couple of days talk about that this is not a Black problem.
Yes.
That it is a white problem, maybe it's human. Maybe you're right. It's human. But it's a white problem in the sense that we are the dominant culture, and we have control at this point over a lot of the institutions that have created bureaucracy and laws and rules and regulations. So I think that I would like to open that up for discussion from everyone, because I think that your point is well taken. And also add on to it this whole idea of it possibly being a white problem, because the white problem is the white people are the people that actually established most of the rules and regulations that we operate under for many, many years.
Yeah, no matter he is treated, this guy is black, even any person, he didn't use this method. So cool, so no messy, I think. Yeah, so I think it's stimulate everyone on the world. Yeah, and under the eyes, who the world looked like a movie. So it's very, very bad. I think it's a how to say, it's a cultural shame. Yeah.
Can I speak to that?
Yeah.
So the act was hideous, but I think we also shouldn't say it wasn't a racial thing, because I don't think that he would have been treated the same way if he was not black. Let's be honest here. I don't know that an officer would have knelt on his neck for 8 to 9 minutes, if he was not black. So I would say
in China have happened similar since 2 years ago, but not on the eyes like so clear. Yeah, this guy died. Yeah, be controlled by policemen. Is died too, but many people, created the public, the policeman, but not so because of the culture, the like Chinese temperature, is similar.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, because I think it's a very big racial issue. So that's why I was like, maybe I don't understand what it is that you're saying, because it's at the same time, the reason why he was treated the way that he was for the most part is because of his skin color. I remember I had a professor in uni who told us a story where she said she had a friend who had 2 adopted children. One was white, one was black. And the lady was wealthy. So anytime her daughters, there were 2 girls, anytime they drove her sports car, the black child was more likely to get pulled over. Why? It's because of the color of her skin. There's nothing else that differentiates the white child from the black child. They're both humans, right? But we have to also address that it's actually a racial thing. Because if you said you wanted to pull them over because they were young, then you would have pulled both of them over. If you say you wanted to pull them over because they were women, you would have pulled both of them over. But you're pulling them over because somebody is darker than the other. So that's why I'm like, I don't really understand. I mean, I understand the whole part of it being a human problem, but it's also a racial problem. So
I
because
agree.
I feel like that takes away.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Joko, can I follow you on that? This is Jill speaking.
Okay.
Yeah, I completely I have to say, I completely agree with you. I think this is totally a racial issue, at least in America. And I can only speak to America because though I've been to other countries, I haven't experienced what their racial culture is to the level that I have here. And also, if you read what Bob Kroll, the head of the police union, wrote, or the response to him by Janae Harto, the former chief of police, if you listen to Emmanuel Acho, who is an NFL linebacker and has done a live, I believe, YouTube video called Uncomfortable Questions with a Black Man, or listen to Charlemagne the God last night on, I think he was on last night or the night before, on Stephen Colbert. I mean, they are coming out and naming this. This is not a black problem. It is a white problem.
Right.
And what
that's what I was talking about.
And what Emmanuel Acho said was, white people are the problem. White people have to help or have to fix it. Because black people in this country can only do so much, and then they run up against that wall again and again and again. And George Floyd was one in thousands of lynchings by police, by everyday people. And also white women are an issue. There's a woman who just wrote a book, and I'm sorry I can't remember the name of it, but what she's addressing is what oh God, the New Jersey Senator, Cory Booker. Today he was talking about how, you know, he's a senator, a US senator, and when he gets on an elevator with a white woman, he gets off because he doesn't want to be accused of doing something to her or of scaring her. And there was a black man who approached a woman, her dog was barking at him, and he asked her to leash her dog. She immediately got on the
Amy
phone
Cooper.
and called
Yep,
the cops
Amy
on him.
Cooper.
Yeah.
Now, I'm sorry, this is a race issue, and we have to deal with it head on. And Loy, I'm not denying what you're saying. What I'm saying is here it might be different. But, you know, there is a thing here called driving while black, walking while black, shopping while black. Anything you do if you're black and you are suspect, it's insane. And right now, about the only safe corner in this community, ironically, is Chicago and 38th Street. I could go over there at midnight, and there are people of all races there, and nobody is being hassled. They just put down concrete barriers on every street that comes to that corner to prevent any of the white supremacists from coming in here with their white trucks with no license plates and white supremacist bumper stickers and running them over. Because they did run over a woman who was biking, and they dragged her bike. She ended up going to the hospital. I mean, it's a horror show. Sometimes we just have to step up.
I grew up in an Italian family, and very homogenous. People all spoke Italian, and I didn't really understand at that time in that homogenous environment racism or differences of color. I understood economics, and I understood other kinds of human nature things that we all experience just being a human being. But I got educated to racism when I came to Minnesota. I came to Minnesota 40 years ago, and I felt like I got thrown into a whole different culture, because at that time, I think Minnesota was 97% white, and I'm Italian, and so I probably was the dark person in the realm of people I was meeting with. And I think I really learned racism even when I worked in the real estate business as I was working for many, many years in that capacity. And I saw discrimination. I mean, blatant discrimination. It made me embarrassed to be white.
I think we got to go back to that idea where we started, this idea of justice. Because what is justice? Ellen, you did a very eloquent piece, but it's only a piece of it. You know, justice in my heart is, you know, balance, it's fairness, but it's all a matter of perception in really true ways. And I don't know if we can get through any of this, nor do I think, and because I really appreciated what Loy had to say, because she's talking to the universal problem, and it's universal. And it's not just black and white in the US, it's all over. But what does justice mean? And justice to me means that balance. Part of the core of who I am is this need for fairness. And I can tell everyone in this space also has that same need. But the only way I know through it, and I'd like to open it up to this idea of community, because I don't know that we are going to go anywhere unless we all do it. And it's not a matter of women or men or people with education or not in education. There's no way through to fairness other than all of us doing it that I can see, and maybe the conversation can be changed from there. Maybe somebody has an idea.
I think the United States right now face multiple problems. The racism is just a kind of phenomenon. It's not the reason. The top 1% share like a 50% of financial wealth of this country. The bottom 80% of Americans share the 5% of the nation's wealth.
I think racism is overlaying all of that. That a lot of the financial pieces are related to racism. And the statistics on crime are worse in the African community and African American community and other communities of color, because that's who they target. The fact is, you know, a lot of times they're in jail for minor crimes, where white people like Bernie Madoff and people much bigger than him are getting away with ripping off millions of dollars from thousands of people, and they don't spend a minute in jail because they're not targeted. You know, it's a matter of who is being targeted by the police for arrest. You know, a white person who has cocaine is much less likely to be arrested than a black person who has crack cocaine. Those are just facts.
One thing I was just going to say is that every society, kind of like what Lois said, so I understand what she was talking about, has their own issues. I mean, in Nigeria, for instance, one of the differences that people tend to focus on is ethnic differences, because obviously we don't have the racial differences to focus on. But these are all social constructs,
right?
You know, because it's just really based on what you think about the person. Because for us, when we talk about ethnic groups in Nigeria, you know, you can't marry. Sometimes your parents will be like, you can't marry this person from this other ethnic group. No, the culture is too different, even though we're all Nigerians, you know.
Just like in China.
So it's one of those things that really just has to do with a social construct, you know, maybe because our great grandparents believed something, our grandparents too believed that, our parents, so we just sometimes or somehow continue the trend, you know. But it's just something, I mean, sometimes I ask myself, can you really, really dismantle social constructs? Because I just feel like it's a lot.
Right.
That you have to tear down. It's something that has been there for centuries. How do you start taking it down piece by piece? I mean, I know when children are born, they're very innocent. They don't have any of these mindsets, but we teach them. And they kind of now end up like us. So how do we then say they shouldn't become us? I don't know. It just seems like a very large
point.
I just wonder if we want to think of our organization as being a funnel for some of our concerns, and if we should look at what's already kind of moving forward in some of these other organizations that are tackling especially the police issue at this time, when it seems like there is a time and a season for some of this change. And if we need to fund our energy together on working with something that's already been started that seems to have a good track record. Obama listed some of the ways he thought we could move forward on these issues of the police brutality, or if we just want to go on our own and try and find our own way. I'm open to thinking, you know, a community can do so much more than just individuals in some of these things. So I kind of think that some of the ones that have maybe been started by maybe the Black Brother Keepers, you know, or some of these others, I mentioned this among, maybe we need to support some of these in various ways.
I love what Liz said, because I think you can do a lot with a community versus doing it alone.
Yes. And we do have some major changes to deal with, because we have to stop brutality and violence. I mean, that's the biggest thing that we're dealing with these last 2 weeks, is against one class of people. It's horrific. So, but I love kind of coming back to what Liz says, to look forward to being a possibility. I think this conversation is going to continue for a while, though. This conversation on social justice, and we're probably going to do more of it coming forward. But I want to thank everyone for showing up today, and I want to thank all of you for making courageous conversation and you know, saying things that sometimes are hard for all of us to hear. So thank you so much.